Just when you thought things could not possibly get worse for Abdul Rahman Mohamed El-Sayed, it turns out his sister is even worse than he is. It's being widely reported that Iman Abdel Hadi, a University of Chicago professor of freaking course, has a long history of, shall we say, rather inflammatory anti-American and anti-Israel and anti-Western civilization posts and statements. In a 2017 tweet, she wrote that, quote, white supremacy historically is the bloodiest ideology of terror that's ever plagued this earth. So I guess if you're white, you're a plague. Other posts show her saying she always, quote, always hated fireworks on the 4th of July. So, boy, when her and her brother get together, it must be a real hoot. She called for the downfall of the U.S. empire, and she questioned why her niece was taught about Thanksgiving turkeys because she thought that was nothing more than settler colonial propaganda. Oh, and she ended up praising Hamas on October 7th. Oh, and again, she's not even the worst. Did I mention Hasan Piker? You know this guy, this streamer, the guy who has Mao as one of his heroes? Piker is one of El-Sayed's best friends. They've openly shared the stage together numerous times on the campaign trail. And if you want a little taste of who Hasan Piker is, take a look at this.
Man, you can me from the back, okay? I the Constitution. I wipe with the Constitution. It's a piece of paper, dude. Shut the the Constitution and mother this country, okay? You stupid.
And that's par for the course. You could just go on X. I'm sorry, there were more beeps than verbs there, nouns are there, but you could just go on X and see excerpt after excerpt after, or you could go in on a streaming platform and watch them there. That's par for the course. That is Abdul Rahman Mohamed El-Sayed's best friend. That's his best buddy. Somebody who wipes his butt with the Constitution. This is the disaster that Democrat operatives like James Carville are seeing in the making. And keep in mind, Mike Rogers, the Republican here, hasn't even spent a dime on attack ads yet. This is all coming prior to the actual start of the campaign. Al-Sayed he's going into September already on his heels. And of course, this is because there's a very sharp distinction between the activist rhetoric that you just heard from influencers like the borderline illiterate Hasan Piker and the campaign rhetoric you're getting from El-Sayed. So if you're an activist like Hasan or these other Democrat socialist influencers out there, then you're unashamedly blatant in your love and reverence for communism and Mao. You don't care about what happened on October 7th or 9/11 for that matter. If I recall, it was Hasan Piker who said we deserved 9/11. They're openly Marxist. They hate the Constitution. They hate the country, and they say it openly. But if you're running for office like El-Sayed, I mean, you have to sanitize your language in order to appeal to the masses. You're doing your best to try to come off not even as a socialist, but just as a sweet, kind guy, with that, like Mamdani, just that smile and you're playing with fire if you're bringing these full, branded communists into your ecosphere, your public ecosphere for all to see. That's the discrepancy voters are starting to recognize. They're realizing more and more. They're hearing they're hearing Piker rather than El-Sayed. And therefore, they're seeing El-Sayed more as a wolf in sheep's clothing. And all we have to do is see who's, supporting him to get that sense of it. And you just got a sense of that. So now the good news is that the split that we talk about on the left is already happening very clearly. The split on the left is already becoming painfully visible for Democrats. Take, for example, Julian Epstein. We talked about him this week. Julian, not Jeffrey. Okay. Julian Epstein, a longtime Democrat operative. He served as chief counsel to the House Judiciary Committee. He worked very hard to elect Hillary Clinton. He's just announced in an op-ed piece in the New York Post, he is done as a Democrat. He's out. He is supporting Mike Rogers, the Republican in the Michigan Senate race. Take a look.
This is not a party I want to have anything to do with. My piece in the New York Post today basically says that I'm jumping ship, that I am going over to the Republican side in the Michigan Senate race, and I'm supporting Mike Rogers. And this is because I think the Democrats have gone off the deep end. I think the lunatics are in charge of the asylum. I think that there is no room in the tent for people that want to destroy our Constitution. There's no room in the tent for people that want to align themselves with radical Islam. There's no room in the tent for people that want to align themselves with anti-Semitism. And there's no room in the tent, I think, in my view, for people that don't have any interest in building for the next generation, but only want to redistribute what others have created and want to basically tear down the free market that has been the most effective anti-poverty liberation machine that human beings have ever invented. If you want to start taking these lunatic positions, then I'm just not going to be part of it. And I suspect this isn't about me. I suspect you're going to see a large group of Democrats starting to defect. I think this is what you're watching in real time here is a party that is jumping off a cliff. And I just don't intend to jump off the cliff with them.
Yeah, and he's not alone. Pennsylvania's John Fetterman. He wants nothing to do with El-Sayed. Obviously, he's not part of Michigan, but Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, they all tend to vote in tandem with one another. And the barometer of Fetterman is very clear. Fetterman has been mercilessly brutal to these DSA candidates. He's going to flip. It's just a matter of time. He'll be a Republican probably by I don't know, probably this time, certainly by 2028. But he was mercilessly brutal. The Maine's Graham Plattner, remember the bona fide Nazi guy? He ended up getting axed from the ticket. And Fetterman is just as brutal with El-Sayed. He doesn't see any difference between the two. So the Democrat Party is split. And that, of course, plays right into the hands of the Republican Mike Rogers, as we're seeing in the 5 latest polls taken in the Michigan race. And again, we don't have to look very far to see the warning shot for the Democrats in all of this. Just look one state over in Wisconsin. Look at what happened there this past Tuesday, right? Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong literally collapsed. She was the runaway favorite for her party's gubernatorial nomination. She was leading by double digits. Some polls had her up as high as 20 points. She was not a single poll showed any of her primary challengers ahead. Even one that was commissioned by her own opponents, the main opponent's campaign. Everyone assumed the DSA wave was about to notch another win in a critical Midwestern battleground just 1 week after El-Sayed's barely his scraping by primary victory. But then all of her radical positions started hitting the headlines. A lot of Republicans thought that was a mistake. They should have waited like they did with El-Sayed. They should have waited, let her win, and then let her implode going into the general. That's what they're planning on with El-Sayed. But they let all of her radical positions come out. She wanted to ban Thanksgiving. She hated the Constitution. She hated the country. She hated whiteness. I guess her son is half white, and she said that's her proximity to whiteness. All this radical festering ideological spew. And even within a Democrat primary, that was too much. Her campaign imploded. Again, just by a point or two, split it right down the middle. That's the pattern we're seeing here with El-Sayed. The DSA, he pulled it off before all this really came out. But, the DSA candidate builds this enormous grassroots enthusiasm and dominates the polling conversation. But when the broader electorate, not just the activist base, actually shows up, the socialist label becomes an anchor rather than a rocket booster. So here's where we actually stand as of today. Michigan has not elected a Republican senator since 1994, over 3 decades of Democrat dominance. But 5 polls in a row during a time of Democrat response bias show Mike Rogers either tied or leading Abdul El-Sayed with margins ranging from a single point to a full 10 points. That collapse is being driven by exactly the dynamic we described before. Democrats and socialists split their own party's coalition while handing Republicans the easiest unifying message in politics. And El-Sayed's own controversies, along with his sister and Hasan Piker, are pouring gasoline on that fire. Trump and the GOP know exactly what they're doing by nationalizing this race and doubling down on El-Sayed's insane communist wokeness. Wisconsin just showed us what happens when a socialist campaign collapses under the weight of its own anti-American absurdities. The question now is whether Michigan Democrats can pull off their own last-minute, Plattner-like rescue, or whether this November the state finally breaks its 3-decade streak and we get a Republican elected to the Senate from Michigan.